Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so Valkyrie is this idea I came up with after kind of, everybody's done vibe coding, and I was like, how can we make this work kind of in the enterprise? As people know, when you try to, vibe code, it's very fun, but there's not any real kind of guardrails to it. There's not any kind of validation. There's not all the stuff that you have when you're in enterprise. And so that was the idea of this application. And so I put together a platform that uses agents, a variety of agents to judge each other and judge their outputs and try to create code that can be used for, that you can actually, that can run and meet the requirements that you've added. So real quick, I am going to go over and start off the build real quick. We won't be able to get everything done in this session. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but I can go ahead and start it off, and we can start to see what it'll run in the background while I continue the application. And so we can kind of enter in some, create a simple video streaming application. And we will say, hey, we'll make it run it in Go, keep it small scope. We're going to say, go ahead and, I guess, run it on GCP. It doesn't need a database, and we'll do multi-region. And then let me grab apologize, the repo that it can publish to when it's done. So we'll go ahead and initialize it. It should start kicking off here. And while it's doing that, I will go back to the presentation, and it's running in the background. And oops. So why, what's the problem statement? And as I mentioned before, there's not a lot of guardrails on application development when you use vibe coding. You don't really know if there's any, if there's any security vulnerabilities. Has there been a unit test made? Do you have any deployment applications that are deployment configurations that have been created? There's not really a lot of context, right? When you start, doing this code, you're kind of going back and forth, but not everything is kind of stored together. So in terms of context, so it's not a very fluid process. And then on top of that, it takes a lot of time to debug, right? Like, hey, what's going on here? You created something, but it kind of wasn't what you needed. So you're going back and forth with the LLM to try to figure out how to get your project running. And so the purpose of this is to kind of use multiple agents to collaborate together to do everything you do when you vibe code, right? Come up with an actual architecture, come up with any kind of security or deployment strategies. Is there a database backend? Is there a UI UX that's needed? And these are all questions that you typically throw in there while you're developing, or maybe at the very beginning. But this kind of creates a structure so that, hopefully at the end of this process, you have a repo that you can use, that will have, the readmes and the architecture documents, deployment scripts, Docker files, all those things, right? So that's the whole purpose. And then on top of that, it allows you to, we have a QA runner that goes through and will start to build the code, right? And if it starts to see issues with the code, build errors, it submits a bug, it sends it back to the developer agent. Hey, this is the bug, fix it. And it goes, and the developer tries to fix it, submits it back to the QA, it goes back and forth, just like a regular, just like your typical development process that you might have in an enterprise. And so, who would kind of use these applications? It's kind of, just initial thoughts on who would use it as companies that have very high compliance, or high security, stuff where they would not necessarily want the developers using, kind of just regular vibe coding. They might want to have some framework or some processes in place to ensure that any code that's generated meets their requirements. Anybody that's got a, kind of an air-gapped environment where they are not allowed to run LLM inside that environment. And so you might want to be able to do all this, application development outside of the environment and create a code base that then you could like ship and put in the air-gapped environment. And then the last one is the consulting firms or system integrators. There's a lot of work being done now with companies or consulting firms that will go through and migrate existing code bases to more modern code bases, like a mainframe or banking software that may have been written in Fortran or whatever it might be. The idea is that you can put in all your PRDs. A new version would hopefully put in a repo, but ingest all that information, put it into the context, and then have the LLM create an architecture, and then have the developer um, uh, develop the code for it. So those are kind of this initial ones. There could be a lot of other cases who might use it, but that's who we kind of think might want to use it off the bat. Um, how does it kind of work? You log in, you give it a spec or you give it a prompt. Right now we have the ability to upload any documents, or you can also just give it a simple prompt like you saw earlier. It takes that and it creates a PRD from that at the very beginning. It's just called the product manager agent. Hey, now we have an idea. I need to create a kind of a plan to go through that or an outline to go through what this application is going to do. Once that is completed, it sends it off to separately to our data and UI architects. You say, hey guys, you go figure out if we need to be used. There may not be a database, so it may not need to use it, or it may not be a UI. There might not be a UI to develop, but it goes and sends those off. At the same time, it sends it off to the application architect, who kind of creates the code architecture that's going to be used. Once that is all kind of completed, then it gets sent off to the developer, and it's kind of like you typically do. You say, hey, developer, develop this application with these requirement stocks, and that's what happens. It goes back, it creates the code. Then when it's done, it commits it to the repo, and then the QA runner picks that up and says, hey, let's see if we can try to compile it. And it goes through its whole process of trying to actually get your running application, submitting bugs for the developer to fix, going back and forth. Once that's complete, then we get our technical documents written, as well as any kind of deployment documents that might be required. And so we will now try to go back to the application to see where we're at. And so we said here earlier, hey, this is a simple video streamer. Create a simple streaming act. And so it created this PRD. It hasn't actually started development yet. Or no, it did kick off. Oh, that's cool. Good. And here's the PRD. This is what it was created from the prompt, and this is what is saying, hey, what's the and it's come up with this stuff. The more information you get it, the less creative it is. But since we gave it a simple prompt, it ran with it. And you also have to be kind of careful. You have to tell the scope of the size of the project, because otherwise it'll create 120 files that you might need to ask an LLM to generate, which gets very expensive. And so anyway, this is the PRD that the system is now going forward and trying to develop an application on. And so as we can see, it's talking with the software architect. We're using Cohere to reduce the size of the prompts, optimize them so that because when we're dealing with code, there could be when you're sending a bunch of PRD documentation, you want it to be kind of optimized so your input tokens aren't really crazy. But it's going to go through this process. We'll go back here since it's still running and look at one that we've already created. And this was just a simple HTTP server. These are all the assets that were created. As I mentioned, this is the GitHub repository that it used and created stuff with. As you can see, it's got hopefully all of the applications that are needed in this are the files that are needed for this application to run. Like it was using Go in this case as well. We've got a Docker file. We have some docs on architecture, API, your typical stuff that you might want to have in an enterprise environment. Let's see here. And then this is all kind of observable through the application. We have our logs here. We can see during the build process how the developer kind of fixed some issues that it saw. And obviously, this isn't testing, so it found a bunch, and then we fixed the bugs to make it work better. But you can see it's going back and forth. The developer agents. Let's get back up here at the top. So you can see here we go, the software architect, the data architect, all the different agents are going and doing their stuff. The developer agent is then taking the file manifest that it needed to create the application. So that's this is the goal. The focus is to create an application for enterprise use. this is what the application is running on. I'm running out of time. I'm sorry for taking so long, but this is, how it's running and whatnot. And all right, thanks for your time, folks.